On the 22nd of September, 1692, Martha Corey was hanged. She was 72 years old, a respected church member, a farmer's wife. Her last words were a prayer. This wasn't some isolated act of cruelty. It was the final note in a symphony of fear that swept across continents for centuries. Martha was one of an estimated 50,000 people executed for witchcraft in Europe and colonial America. But what turned ordinary neighbors, friends, and family members into accused witches, and their communities into judges and executioners? This wasn't a story about magic. It was a story about us. Let's step back to the world that created these fears. Imagine a time when life was fragile. The Black Death had wiped out nearly half of Europe's population. Famines were common, winters were brutal, and wars were constant. When a child fell sick with a fever no one could explain, when a hailstorm destroyed the harvest, or when a cow suddenly stopped giving milk, people desperately sought a reason. Without modern science, they found one in malice, human malice. They believed someone, somewhere, was using supernatural power to cause their suffering. The villain wasn't a germ or a weather pattern. The villain was a witch, and this fear became a weapon. In the fractured landscape of the Reformation and Counter-Reformation, accusing someone of witchcraft became a way to enforce religious purity and social control. It was a tool for the powerful to eliminate rivals, and for the powerless to explain their misfortune. It started with a whisper. A strange old woman living at the edge of town. A midwife whose patient died in childbirth. A farmer whose crops thrived while his neighbors failed. One accusation, born of envy or suspicion, was all it took. Once an accusation was made, the system was designed for conviction. Imagine being arrested and told you are a witch. You deny it, of course, but your denial is seen as proof of your cunning. You are then subjected to tests. One common test was swimming the witch. You'd be tied up and thrown into a river. If you floated, it was proof the water, a pure element, was rejecting you. You were a witch. If you sank and drowned, you were innocent. Either way, you were likely to die. Another method was looking for the devil's mark, a spot on the body insensitive to pain. A professional pricker would jab your body with a needle. They found a numb spot, perhaps a scar or a mole, you were condemned. Unsurprisingly, these prickers often used retractable needles to fake the result. The most effective tool, however, was pressure. Under agonizing conditions, sleep deprivation, and psychological torment, people would confess to anything. They would confess to flying on broomsticks, to meeting the devil in the woods, to casting spells on their neighbors. And then came the crucial question: who else was there with you? To stop the pain, they would name others, friends, family, people they barely knew. Each confession spawned a dozen new accusations. A single spark of suspicion could ignite an entire region. In the German territory of Würzburg, nearly 900 people were executed in just a few years, including nobles, mayors, and even children. In Salem, Massachusetts, a handful of accusations from a group of young girls led to 20 executions and a community torn apart forever. The panic was a contagion. What did people truly believe a witch was? They imagined someone who had made a pact with the devil, renouncing their faith in exchange for dark powers. They believed witches could curdle milk, kill livestock, raise storms, and cause disease. They gathered in secret Sabbaths to perform unspeakable rituals. This was the folklore, the terrifying fantasy. The reality: the accused were overwhelmingly women, many of them poor old and widowed people on the margins of society who had no one to defend them. But not always. Midwives were common targets, their knowledge of childbirth and herbs viewed with suspicion. But so were wealthy merchants and respected community leaders. No one was truly safe. Innocence was not a shield. Interestingly, the intensity of the witch hunts varied wildly across Europe. The heart of the burning times wasn't in Spain or Italy, where the Inquisition was strong but focused more on heresy. It was in the Holy Roman Empire, modern-day Germany, Switzerland, and France, where political fragmentation and religious conflict created a perfect storm. Germany alone accounted for nearly half of all executions. Meanwhile, countries like Ireland and Portugal saw very few trials. This map of fear shows us it wasn't a universal phenomenon, but one that thrived in specific conditions of instability and anxiety. Agnes Waterhouse was executed in England in 1566. She confessed that her cat, whom she called Satan, had helped her kill her neighbor's livestock. She was the first woman executed for witchcraft in England. What followed her confession was a trial built on fear and superstition. But under the weight of it all, we often forget the human cost. Think of the families destroyed, the children left orphaned, the communities living in constant terror, wondering who would be next. The trust between neighbors evaporated, replaced by suspicion. Everyone watched everyone else, listening for a misplaced word or an unusual success that could be twisted into an accusation. The very fabric of society was unraveling, thread by thread. And then, as slowly as it began, it started to fade. The scientific revolution offered new explanations for the world. A more stable legal system began to demand stricter evidence. People grew weary of the bloodshed. Enlightenment thinkers argued for reason over superstition, but the change was slow. It took centuries for society to look back and admit the horrific mistake it had made. The laws that allowed for witch trials were eventually repealed, but the scars remained. So why do we look back at this dark chapter of history? Is it just a collection of morbid stories from a superstitious past, or is it a mirror? The witch hunts were ultimately a story of mass hysteria, where fear overwhelmed reason, and us versus them mentality took hold, and an entire group of people were demonized to explain society's problems. It was a failure of the justice system, a failure of religion, and a failure of basic human empathy. It raises an uncomfortable question. Could a similar phenomenon happen today, just with a different name for the witch? When we face uncertainty, when we are afraid, do we still look for someone to blame? The final haunting truth of the witch hunts is this. The vast majority of those accused were not outsiders. They weren't strange figures living in the woods. They were ordinary people. They were your neighbor, the woman who sold you bread, the man you saw in church every Sunday. They were people deeply embedded in their communities until that community, consumed by fear, turned on them. Martha Corey was a pious, hard-working woman. Her crime was being different, being outspoken, and living in a time of fear. And for that, she was erased. Her story, and the story of 50,000 others, serves as a permanent warning. Fear is a fire, and when it burns uncontrolled, it consumes the innocent first. Thank you for watching. If you found this meaningful, consider subscribing for more deep dives into our shared past.